Midwest College Football Podcast, joined as always by Clinton Boring. My name is Ryan Satkowiak, and we're really stretching the Midwest quote unquote portion of this podcast tonight as we are continuing our spring, wrapping up the Big Ten portion of our spring previews with a little California road trip talking USC and UCLA. And to help us break down USC, we are pleased to be joined tonight by Marc Kulkin of the Locked On Trojans podcast and wearesc.com. Marc, thank you so much, sir, for joining us this evening. How are you tonight?
Fantastic, man. How you guys doing?
Oh, not too bad.
All right.
I'm doing pretty good. We have going to need Noah's Ark here soon in Columbus. We've had enough rain. Ryan, I don't know how it is in Michigan for you, but it has been a mess here over the past 4 to 5 days, and we're going to get another full day of rain tomorrow.
Yeah, we got a lot last night. My sump pump kept making a toilet flushing sound, which I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but there's no water in the basement, so that's good news.
Mark, how's the weather in Cali?
Oh, don't tell me. I don't want to know.
Well, we get to practice outside during spring camp. We have to pull that stuff indoors. So it rains like 5 days out of the year. It actually happened to rain on the day where USC would normally hold their spring game. It was called the Trojan Olympics this year.
Mm-hmm. Nice.
But the sky cleared in time, so they were able to do their stuff.
Nice.
But, it rarely rains in California. You can always count it to rain on USC Pro Day, though. It looked like it's going to happen.
It's unique. Well, guys, if you're joining us tonight, you can find us on YouTube, ITP CFB. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you can never miss a minute of the show. You can also find us on your socials, Instagram and Twitter, ITP CFB. And then don't forget, if you can't catch us on the live show Monday, Thursday nights, you can find us next morning in your podcast feed, whichever preferred podcast platform you have.
So, talking about USC tonight, Marc, I don't know how I want to kind of dive into this tactfully, so I'm just going to ask it straight up. Is Lincoln Riley on the hot seat heading into 2025?
So based on the last 2 years of final season records, you'd say probably. But when you dissect it a little bit closer and you take everything into consideration, the roster he inherited, the way USC was playing the NIL game, trying to catch up with recruiting, trying to establish those California relationships, to enhance your recruiting, and then all of a sudden, coming off a 7-6 season, you're looking at USC's 2026 recruiting class, and you're going, why do they have the number one recruiting class in the country when they haven't really been doing anything well consistently? They had Lincoln Riley's first year at USC with Caleb Williams. You win 11 games. You win the Heisman Trophy. You're literally a pulled hamstring away from going to the playoffs.
Mm-hmm.
But ever since then, things have kind of been trending the opposite direction. And that's why I brought up his last 2 seasons, where you're winning games in seven games respectively. That's not going to cut it. That's why you preface the question: is he on the hot seat? Normally, yeah, you would be. But when you take everything into consideration, and then you look at how they're recruiting right now, it kind of gives him a little bit where the water's a little bit more tepid.
Mm-hmm.
You're not worrying anymore. It's just kind of, hey, get it done this year. You've got the players. You've made all the off-season adjustments. You got the general manager. All those little things that they said USC was lagging behind in. You feel better about the program going forward.
Well, it's so strange to look at the record last year, and I think it got said so many times that it kind of started as a joke, and eventually it just became kind of like, okay, at 5-5 you are what you are now, but like we're not talking about a team that was getting smacked around last year. I mean, you're in the Michigan game, you're in the Minnesota game, you leading Penn State by 2 touchdowns at halftime, you have a epic collapse at the end of the Maryland game. I mean, they were 20 yards away from tying Notre Dame at the end of that game. So, I mean, you're looking at a host of these losses that one play breaks the other way. And, maybe at a certain point, right, we're not saying like, hey, if the breaks go your way, you're going 10-2. But, I mean, it's not a team that was that far off. And they took a big step forward defensively, and they were still good offensively despite losing the Heisman Trophy winner from 2023. So, I mean, I think when you look, I agree with you there. You look a little bit deeper underneath the hood there. I mean, there still feels like there's a lot to be positive about heading into 2025 with this team.
One of Lincoln Riley's favorite things to say last year after each of those losses was, "We're really close. This team is a lot closer than you think we are." And he's absolutely correct. You brought up those games. If I was to tell you that USC with a Lincoln Riley's a coach. Doesn't matter what team, and he has a defense that's only given up 24 points per game. You're probably thinking they're winning 10 out of every 11 games, right?
Mm-hmm.
You brought up they were good offensively. Statistically, yes. There was a lot of empty stats though. Last year was the first time since I think 2017 where his team didn't average at least 39 points per game. USC only averaged 30 points per game last year. But you brought up those games. They played with Penn State. They had that game won at home. They ended up losing it in overtime. Penn State ends up being a playoff team. You brought up the Notre Dame game. Yes, they're 20 yards away from tying it, and a couple pick six later, they're losing the game by 14 points. You brought up Minnesota. You brought up Michigan, brought up Maryland. All the common denominators there. You had terrible turnovers. There's never a good time for them. Mm-hmm. But USC would shoot in the foot. And as good as USC's defense improved last year, they were still razor thin when it came to depth. Mm-hmm. So all of a sudden now you lose Eric Gentry, you lose Anthony Lucas. You don't have the backups at their caliber. So yeah, they were close, but they weren't close enough, I guess is the best way to put it. It wasn't horseshoe. And you ended up going 6-6 in the regular season. And you're putting a little cherry on the end saying, hey, we beat the SEC to begin the season and we beat the SEC to end the season. But you're still 7-6 when everything goes.
That week one win over LSU had Ryan and I bumping pretty good on the show when we did our review show for the week, and we were excited to see the SEC fall, and then obviously kind of the roller coaster ride that ensued after USC there.
It was an interesting season to see.
Well, I'm gonna spin it to a different direction. Ryan and I always go offense to start this show, but you were talking about the defense. We are now under year 2 of D'Anton Lynn. In 2024, they allowed 377 yards per game, much improved from the 432 in 2023. However, a issue that has lingered since Lincoln Riley's days at USC and maybe at Oklahoma was the missed tackle problem. And looking back at the Minnesota game that we talked about, they had 15 missed tackles in that game. They had, from what I could count of the multiples, I didn't get all the solos, but 93 plus missed tackles last season. They had 135 missed tackles in 2023 and 156 missed tackles in 2022. In addition to the missed tackles, they only had 21 sacks last year, which was putting them 14th in the Big Ten. So what have they done to address this tackling issue and thereby also a D-line issue, given the pressure that they're not really generating on the opposing quarterback?
So let's just start up front at the D-line. First thing they did, and again, this is where that margin of error where they were really razor thin. They couldn't afford to lose anybody. Last year, the interior of USC's defensive line was Gavin Meyer, Kobe Pepe, and some freshmen. A guy like Jayden Maiava from Minnesota. They don't have the guys up front. They had Bear Alexander for a few games before he decided to quit and jump into the transfer portal again. So again, they didn't have those guys. So what did they do in the offseason? They went and they found 700 pounds of defensive interior linemen from the SEC. Keyshawn Silver from Kentucky, and then Jamal Jarrett from Georgia. Immediately, how that helps with your tackling. Well, if guys now aren't into the open field where you have to say, all right, take a better angle, get your arms around them, you can close those gaps a little bit more. I think it helps from that perspective. You get Anthony Lucas back. You brought up the sack numbers. Again, that was another area where USC would get close. They're like a step away. They never got the sack. When you get the push up front in the middle, you make that that distance from point A to point B a lot shorter. So now a quarterback has to flush from the pocket, either go to the left, go to the right. Somebody now is there to help clean up a little bit to generate those sacks. You're getting guys coming back second year into the system. So you're past that learning curve. Everything that D'Anton Lynn brought over now becomes second nature. You're strong up the middle at safety with Kamari Ramsey. You brought over the guy Bishop Fitzgerald from North Carolina State. And at linebacker, you have Rob Ryan, hopefully improving on the improvements that Matt Entz made before he went off to Fresno State to be their head coach. So you have Eric Gentry back again. You have Desmond Stevens, who's now a true sophomore. He was a true freshman last year. Jaden Walker, you take the red shirt off of him. He's another kid from Michigan that came out to USC. And they moved Anthony Beavers up from safety up to linebacker. And then they just brought in Tamir Robinson out of the transfer portal from Penn State. So that's your linebacker level. You're basically what I'm trying to say is they've improved the talent level. Not a knock on Easton Mascarenas-Arnold, who went off to the NFL, or Achille Arnold, who's off to the NFL. But USC just feels like they're better from a roster standpoint. Everything they've been doing.
Kind of the more youthful names to watch potentially for this defense. I have two that I pull up myself, but if you have any other ones, Jakeem Stewart and is it Cameron Fontaine or is it Fountain? How do you say his last name? Fountain.
Absolutely.
All right. How much impact that those guys will have this year? Is there any other names that we should be keeping our eyes on the defense?
So you brought up the biggest recruit that USC can say they've signed on defense in a long time, Jakeem Stewart. He was Mr. Everybody Wants Him guy coming out of high school. He reclassified. He's going to play this year at USC. He's still a baby, but he's got those intangibles that typically, this is a guy who ends up at Ohio State or, pick your top of the SEC program of the year. He's that type of guy. Another young guy, you brought up Cameron Fountain. He was a freshman last year. He looks like an NFL body right now, one of those first guys off the bus. He's more confident in the system. He's at the point now where, I know this sounds trivial, but they had him mic'd up at the end of spring camp. So when you start putting that type of player where they feel confident now because they know other players are watching them, yeah, he's a guy who can step up. Again, another guy that USC brought out of Georgia out to USC. He's got that type of body. I mentioned Jade Abasere earlier. He's another big first guy off the bus guy who can play defensive tackle. Braylon Shelby, third year into the program. So yes, there's a lot of young guys to look forward to. I don't know how soon you'll get to see him play. Remember the name Floyd Boucard. Big nose tackle, defensive tackle guy from Canada, was playing high school ball in Miami. Eric Henderson just used these words about him last week. We had brunch with the assistant coaches, and he doesn't toss around the word elite very often, but he said Floyd Boucard has elite feet, and he was drawing the comparison to Aaron Donald. So he said Floyd Boucard will play on Sundays, period, end of story. So yeah, USC, again, they're young, but they've got a lot more talent than they had last year, where they were so close, but as the games wore on, as the season wore on, they were just getting worn down at the end of games.
Mark, you mentioned Gentry earlier, and that losing him, not even halfway into the season, obviously a big blow to this defense. Do you guys have a medical update on him through spring? Is he good to go? Has he been full participant and everything?
Yeah, he's 100%. He's
okay.
In fact, he's been having a lot of fun this spring. Last year he was rejuvenated when Matt Entz came around, kind of showed him how to play linebacker again. Now he's got Rob Ryan, and that guy is just Mr. Personality, and there's nothing that he hasn't seen in the defensive world that he can't pass along. So now Eric Gentry just gets to pick his mind and kind of enhance, those natural attributes that he has. The way Rob Ryan and D'Anton Lynn and the entire coaching staff talk about Eric Gentry, he's a unicorn. the way that they can use him because of his length and the way, not only is he, one of USC's better tacklers, but you can use him in pass coverage as well. It's hard to throw over the top, and he closes the gap, moving laterally a lot quicker than people think, just because of his stride, his gait, how much ground he can cover.
I mean, the biggest number that stood out to me when I saw him was 6'6" for a linebacker. I was like, dear God, that guy is a monster human being. And I know I've seen some of your posts before where you'll take a little video of the guys walking in, and just having worked with these level of guys and NFL guys before, they're genetic freaks in the complement of the word of human beings. And there's reasons why us three are sitting here and those guys are out there on the field, right?
I'll tell you, Rob Ryan loves what he has to work with Eric Gentry. He is so excited about that guy. The problem with Eric is, can he stay on the field?
Yeah.
There has not been one season yet where he's played a full season of games.
Has it all been concussion related, or was that just mostly last season?
Last year was concussion related. It's always been something, whether a knee ding, an ankle, something, a shoulder. Last year was cumulative, and it just ended up being a concussion.
Okay.
And what was so interesting, he was trying to avoid hitting somebody. He was diving over the pile in that Penn State game.
Oh wow!
Because the whistle had already blown, but it was an awkward landing.
Oh, man.
So looking at the other side of the ball, and we're talking about head coach in Lincoln Riley, who's rightfully developed a reputation as a quarterback savant with what he has been responsible for developing throughout his head coaching career. And I don't know if it was a fit thing. I don't even know that he was necessarily the problem last year, but Miller Moss just did not seem like that same style of quarterback that Lincoln Riley has had a ton of success with. And I mean, you're looking at, obviously, the bar there is high with Baker Mayfield and Kyler Murray and Jalen Hurts, but in comes Jayden Maiava, and I thought he showed flashes towards the end of the season when he got the opportunity to be the starter full time. Heading into this year, are we talking about a foregone conclusion that we're going to see him as QB1 this year? Are you expecting Husan Longstreet, the 5-star freshman, to give him a run for his money in fall camp?
So what's so interesting is before the season started last year, people were wondering, will you see a 2-quarterback system, because Miller Moss is more of the in the pocket, true pocket quarterback, where Jayden Maiava is the athletic guy. You can use his legs, you use him in that capacity in certain situations. Coach Riley said they're both a very similar quarterback. I don't think anybody was anticipating them throwing untimely interceptions, pick sixes at the worst times during games, but that was a similarity between them. Whatever reason, Jayden and that athleticism really never got put into the game plan, at least not to the satisfaction of USC fans. The other thing that Lincoln Riley, I think, even though they had their first 1,000-yard rusher since 2017, is, did he run the ball enough, and did he run it at the right time? They had leads in every fourth quarter, but for some reason the clock was never their friend in the game, and a lot of times you would say, well, how come you're not running the ball? You brought up the Minnesota game. Woody Marks had 120 yards, into the fourth quarter, and he didn't touch it for the last 10 minutes of the game. It just made no sense.
Yeah.
It's those types of things. So to answer your question, I'm hoping that last year was a learning curve going to the big conference, where he's been familiar with the big, the Big 12, the Pac-12, where it's more wide open, more passing, where he has to kind of, all right, let's get those offensive linemen, let's do a little bit more 3 yards in a cloud of dust mixed in with great passing schemes. He's just trying to find that balance, and I think that's where USC was last year. They got lost. Again, 30 points per game. That's unheard of for a Lincoln Riley offense. Some of it, again, the quarterback didn't match his type of play that you were talking about, but did his type of play work in the big conference?
I think
we'll is Jayden Maiava ready to take that next step and make better decisions? Because that a lot of times that's what it came down to.
You said 3 yards in a cloud of dust, and I'm pretty sure Woody Hayes and Bo Schembechler, good Lord, just smiled down from the heavens and then looked at that one. They love that. Well, you bring up being able to utilize the run game this year. Woody Marks, phenomenal addition from Mississippi State last year. Absolutely loved him in real college football, and I loved utilizing him in the new college football game that came back out. It was an absolute blast. But not only do you guys lose him to the NFL now with the Texans, but you lost Quentin Joyner, who I think was going to be the expected running back to replace him. He is now at Texas Tech.
Right.
Those two last year combined, looking at this, if I can do quick math, about 1,600 yards on the ground with 12 TDs. Can you kind of talk about who the Trojans have added or what they've kept within the team and kind of how this backfield is going to look for 2025?
So not only did they lose those guys, Amari and Peterson also left during the transfer portal during the spring. So what was left was Brian Jackson, who you got a little bit of a taste of him in the Las Vegas Bowl against Texas A&M. He's a bigger back, kind of in the Lendale White type of mode.
Yes, that's what I had.
Yep. But USC hit the portal, and they brought in a young man. His name is Waymon Jordan, and then they also brought in Eli Sanders from New Mexico. He was a 1,000-yard rusher. Waymon Jordan was the number one JUCO running back, I guess, coming out into the transfer portal available. USC really likes what they saw from him this spring. I haven't really seen a whole lot of him during the spring just because of what the media has been allowed to see. But people who have watched practice, people whose opinions I respect, said he's got that Ashton Genty type of vibe.
Ooh.
He will not only make you miss, but he's not afraid to get yards after contact. That was the difference between him, I guess, and Woody Marks. You didn't touch Woody for 5 yards. I mean, he saw the hole, he was through it, and he's got 5 yards, but he would go down after contact. He wasn't the strongest guy. Waymon Jordan's just a little bit different from that. He'll get you some yards after contact. He'll run through your chest type of guy. Eli Sanders, he's more of the big play. Again, you can also line him up at the slot. He's got really good hands. He can catch the ball. And then USC brought in a couple of young guys this year in the recruiting class, Riley Wormley out of Texas, and Dalton from Virginia, Harry Dalton from Virginia, and I know Alabama wanted him really bad. So USC's running back stable. It's talented. It's just a matter of how many reps is Brian Jackson going to get? How many reps is Waymon Jordan going to get? How many reps is Eli Sanders going to get? Call it champagne problems. You got the guys. You just want to make sure everybody's happy.
Just say, is there anytime a guy comes up from the FCS level, we're always some general concern. I'm sorry, this would be JUCO level about concern and acclimation to the Big Ten. But in reading about Wayman, he has the nickname Junkyard Dog. So if there's any dude that can do it, I certainly think it might be possible for him.
Yeah, one of his They were kind of teammates at Hutchinson. Jeonre Reed, who USC also brought over in the transfer portal. He's going to probably be the starting center this year. He was at Syracuse last year. You brought up the name Junkyard Dog. He said, yeah, when Waymon's out here with a leash off, and he's just kind of humping around right now. So, he is known as the Junkyard Dog, and he's off the leash right now.
That's awesome.
He's impressing everybody.
Yeah.
Everybody's looking at him going, that's a dude.
That's awesome.
Well, kind of wrapping up here, Mark, I wanted to touch on the schedule briefly, and it's not, if you look at the teams on this schedule, obviously you got 2 playoff teams from 2024 on here, both on the road against Oregon and Notre Dame. You got Michigan on here not having to go to the Big House this time, but we're looking at 4 trips, depending on what you would classify a flight to Nebraska as a cross country here, at Purdue, at Illinois, at the aforementioned Notre Dame, and at Nebraska. And a lot was made last year, obviously, about the travel between coasts in the Big Ten. We were talking Washington last week, and that was a team last year that struggled with that transition going out east for road games. And I just wanted to kind of broach the question that we asked our guests with Washington as well. With these road trips, have you guys gotten a sense of anything that USC might be doing to better prepare for those longer road trips, particularly given the media relations that the Big Ten has with Fox, some of these games might end up being a 9 a.m. local start?
Yeah, Lincoln Riley, he likes to keep his cards close to the vest. I haven't heard anything that they're going to be doing differently yet. They're going to use last year, obviously, as a learning curve and see what they have to do differently. Look, I'm not one of those people who say the travel plays a big thing in this. These are young guys. They're not flying coach. They're not all stuck in middle seats.
Mm-hmm.
They're not staying at Motel 6 with Tom Bodett. Does it play a little bit? Sure. I don't know if USC is going to be playing any 9 a.m. games because, like you said, the TV execs, they don't want USC on early in the morning in LA.
Mm-hmm.
You want the LA market. That's one of the reasons why you brought USC into the big conference. So, it's different than Ohio State playing Michigan. It's just different. You guys are used to that 9 a.m. kickoff start. Well, at least for us, it's 9 a.m. on the West Coast.
Mm-hmm.
It's new for you guys.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it's going to. I don't know how much what they're going to do differently. I don't know how much they can do differently. Does coming out a day early, does that make that big of a difference? I mean, do you add an extra day to your road trip? Does it really change the time clock?
Mm-hmm.
Do you make that big of an adjustment? I don't know.
Well, the only schedule question you're going to get from me is about the Victory Bell. What is your thoughts on UCLA adding Nico Iamaleava? And now does that swing it a little bit? UCLA going to pull the upset this year, or are we going to keep rolling with the Trojans?
Let's just keep rolling with the Trojans. I don't know. It'll be interesting. I'm interested to see how he and the locker room come together. The way, the acrimony, the way he left Tennessee, the way his younger brother is treated UCLA and Arkansas. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
That's an odd situation. I'm sort of familiar with the dynamics behind the scenes because they're from Southern California. I think he has a major PR repair job to do. Well before USC UCLA play at the end of the season. Let's see how he and his team come together these first few games.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. That's for sure. Well, Marc, we appreciate you joining us this evening. Before we let you get out of here, sir, go ahead and let our listeners know where they can find your work.
Yeah, so I do the Locked On USC podcast 5 times a week, every day. And then when I'm not there every day, head on over to wearesc.com, part of the On3 network. Right now, you can take advantage of a $1 subscription special for a week. You'll get all the inside information. We've got our recruiting guru, Scott Schrader, over there. We got Eric McKinney. If you want to, trust me, get over there. You'll get all the information you want, and you won't be disappointed.
There's a lot to follow in USC recruiting right now. Marc Kulkin from wearesc.com and the Locked On Trojans podcast. Sir, thank you so much for joining us this evening. Have a wonderful rest of your night.
Thank you, Marc.
Appreciate you. Thank you.
That was a nice little segue, Clinton, to the UCLA portion of this discussion.
I got some hidden talents here or there. I always find it, Ryan, when we go to wrap these guys up and we tell them that they can kind of piece out on their own, it's always that awkward, 3-second stare of do they know to press the turn off button?
Yeah, I think they got it. I think there was only. I think we've only had one, and it wasn't when we stayed live, where they were just we finished and they were just kind of staring at us hey,
yep.
What's up?
Well, how did we do fall previews last year? We only did one team per night,
yeah,
right?
we
didn't
were
double
only,
up
yeah,
on that at
no,
all.
we
So that made it
doubled.
very easy.
Or if we did double up, there was a half hour between.
Yeah, something like that. Well, we ended the USC talk with the UCLA talk, so let's kick it off. We're coming into year 2 of Deshaun Foster. Hopefully, he gives a better interview at Big Ten Media Days this year. The Bruins finished 5-7, 3-6 in the Big Ten overall. But as Ryan mentioned in the offseason, when we kind of handed out grades, it was a tale of two seasons. 1-5 in their first 6, and finished 4-2 in their last 6. This team was competitive in a lot of their games. They went down to Baton Rouge, gave LSU a game. We realized that, it's a pretty typical Brian Kelly, not that great team as the season went on. But for a team that it lost so much right away, right before the season, with Chip Kelly's departure and all the changes, for Foster to step in and be able to get this team on the right track in their last 6 games, certainly creates some positive momentum coming into the 2025 season, building excitement. And I think, Ryan, if you have anything to add on UCLA, add it. Otherwise, I think we just go right into the big arrival of Nico Iamaleava to UCLA.
Well, I mean, that's going to be the story of the UCLA football season, fair or not, because of how that situation played itself out, and not just how it played itself out, but kind of the dominoes that fell as a result of it, right? They more or less traded quarterbacks with Tennessee.
It's like an NFL move.
Yeah. So it's one of those things that, I mean, these two teams are going to be inextricably linked all season. And I don't know that that's kind of building off of what Marc just said there. I'm just fascinated to see how the team takes to him, because you have this perception of the player, and it was kind of like a mudslinging thing through the media. Like they said he wanted more money and we didn't think he was worth it. We stood our ground. We never asked for more money, yada, yada, yada. And it's kind of one of those, which side are you believing? But then, I mean, the other side of that coin is you have a UCLA locker room that spent all spring with a new offensive coordinator devising an offense around Joey Aguilar. And these kids were getting comfortable with him, getting behind their quarterback, and then bippity boppity boop, spring ball ends. By the way, he's not our quarterback anymore. He's out the door going to Tennessee because we just brought in Tennessee's quarterback. So I don't know what that does to a locker room. I'm sure there's a sense of excitement for getting a player of that perceived talent level, but what's the joke if we're still talking about your high school star rating 3 years into your college career? Are you actually that good? And I think the talent is there for sure. I'm not the biggest Nico fan. I mean, I think I did the math and I don't remember what it came back to, but I think he ended up, it was like 1.1 touchdowns per game against Power 4 teams last year. So, I mean, he wasn't that good, man. He really wasn't that good. And you're putting a lot on the line for a guy who wasn't particularly great last year in an offense that's kind of designed to be one read quarterback friendly. And it just feels like something that can kind of go bad if things don't start off on the right foot.
I mean, you could argue, right, that Joey Aguilar just landed in the better situation, given the weapons and the money that Tennessee has, having Josh Heupel, who's an experienced head coach. Yes, he's got to go learn this system, but Tennessee's sitting much better at this point than UCLA, whereas Nico's coming into another team that's, I mean, reading over the roster, man, they brought in so much through the portal.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Tennessee didn't really have a ton at receiver compared to what they had in previous years, and then Dante Thornton's gone too, so Dylan Sampson's gone too. So, I mean, it's definitely it feels like a better situation, but I don't know how much of that is defense versus the offensive skill talent at hand.
Again, not to knock the Big Ten, we cover them. I'm always a Big Ten lover, but Tennessee's going to have games against Alabama. They're going to have games against Georgia, Florida with DJ Lagway. That is brutal week in and week out in the SEC, where we know is sometimes in the Big Ten you might pull more of a couple Vandy-esque teams.
Well, no, because then the issue with is in the SEC you have 10 of the 14 teams are consistently in the top 25 of the recruiting rankings, whereas in the Big Ten you have Ohio State, you have Michigan, you have Penn State, and then maybe like Wisconsin or Nebraska.
Yeah, USC in there right now.
USC for sure. Yep. I keep forgetting Oregon. I keep forgetting these teams are in the Big Ten, but it's just like you have, like, there's no SEC comparable for Michigan State or Maryland or Northwestern, because even Vandy last year was pretty good. But
Bringing
anyway,
back Diego Pavia again.
anyway, that's my side tangent for the day. I always get a kick when I see the Big Ten's the best conference in college football. I'm like, well, yeah, at the top, yes, but the rest of the conference is kind of, you can take it or leave it. Yeah.
Well, you brought this to my attention when Nico first went into the portal, and we're going to rattle off these stats here for the hundreds to thousands of UCLA fans watching us. I'm sure you know. 2,616 yards last year, 19 TDs, 5 picks, 63.8% completion percentage. However, 11 of those 19 touchdowns came against UTEP, Chattanooga, and the aforementioned Vanderbilt Commodores.
It's not great, man.
Well, let's get it even better. In SEC play, he had 9 touchdowns, 6 turnovers, and 4 of those touchdowns came against Vanderbilt, which means in the remaining 5 other SEC games, 5 TDs.
It's not great.
And then let's talk about, he didn't perform that well in the horseshoe. I mean, he was kind of their saving grace to an extent. He moved the ball for him, but he wasn't great.
Well, I mean, in his defense, that game was probably over before he even took the field.
Possibly. And then you lose Sampson, taps out after the first quarter. That's a big fall. But everybody always dives to the stats and shows 19 TDs to 5 picks, 2,700 yards, or just over 2,600. 63.8% completion percentage is pretty good. But then you point out the deeper dive of the stats, what we just told you, it's not as pretty as what you think, which is why you should do your homework, folks, because just reading the ESPN 2024 stat sheet is not always telling of the story.
Stats do not lie, but they can be manipulated to fit your argument better.
Absolutely.
The Internet 2025.
Or we can dive deep and then just shatter your argument altogether. So I think the biggest portion is, Mark mentioned it, you mentioned it, can this team come around Nico? Well, what's left to surround Nico with? So we look at the running back room. TJ Harden's gone. He's now replacing, is it Brashad Smith? Was that his last name, Smith, from SMU? He's going to SMU to be their lead running back.
Yep.
So what do? They just recently added in the spring portal Javion Thomas coming over from Cal, another Cal defect. I don't even know if Cal has a roster at this point.
Yeah, it might not.
626 yards, 7 TDs last year. I believe, Ryan, correct me if I'm wrong, this was the young man taking reps from Jayden Ott last year. So pretty solid running back.
Maybe.
They also bring in an FCS player, Anthony Woods from Idaho State. He had over 2,000 yards, 19 touchdowns in 2 seasons. However, the one caveat to that is he missed all of 2024 with a knee injury. They do return Jalen Berger and Keegan Jones, but they had minimal action last year, kind of not really major stats to report on. But then they bring in a running back that they are excited about in Carson Cox, incoming freshman, to be a part of this. So looking at that running back room, you lose your veteran Harden who has been with the program that you could lean on, and you have to bring in 2 transfer portal guys to be your main focus. So, when Nico's not a young quarterback to break in, but breaking in a new system, new conference, having to lead on this run game, we'll kind of see how that goes for them.
Shout out the wide receiver room, Rico Flores Jr.
He's still there.
Well, I don't think he didn't play after September. I think he got hurt.
No.
But he left Notre Dame because he said he wanted to, quote, win the Biletnikoff, and that going to UCLA to do that was kind of a choice. But
good luck beating out Jeremiah Smith and Ryan Williams for that this year.
Yeah, man, that's going to be tough.
Yeah.
He had 100 yards his first game with UCLA. Granted, it was against Hawaii, but
there wasn't a whole lot of positive that time with that team, man.
No. Yeah, I don't know where you want to kind of go next. Do you want to go defense a little bit here?
I was going to touch the big receivers. J. Michael Sturdivant and Logan Loya are gone. They are led by Ryan. Go ahead and take a shot at that name there.
Titus Mokiao Atimalala.
See,
Atimalala.
That's great. Ryan has his journalism degree, and we put it to the test. Last 2 seasons at UCLA, they have Quasi Gilmer who also made significant contributions as a freshman last year. They think he's a rising star with big play potential. 31 passes, 345 yards, 2 TDs. And of all the players, he might be the one who's most likely to grow into their number one target. They hit the transfer portal for their slot position. Mikey Matthews coming over from Cal. Hey, Ryan, we have a chat down there, baby. Check that out there. 272 yards, 1 TD.
Oh, my gosh. Somebody wants to talk about... Here's just popped onto my YouTube recommendation. Just want to say keep going. I recommend anybody putting out YouTube comment. God bless. Thank you, Jameer. I love you.
Appreciate you. And then they also have Jadon Wilson, who transferred in from Arkansas. So, again, we're bringing in more SEC experience to combine with Nico. He's a 6'3" monster, so can make him a valuable piece on the outside. And then they're returning Hudson Humbermel from a torn ACL in 2024 at the tight end position. So I think that's what this trend of this whole team is. It feels like transfers. So we'll see how that all gels together. That is if you look at a guy like, I'm not comparing Deshaun Foster to Deion Sanders, but kind of the style of living with the transfer portal. It'll be very interesting to see how UCLA handles this, at least offensively, moving forward for this year.
Amen.
I was just saying, I was diving in. We get another chat.
Hey, Jameer, he's a Buffs fan. Let's go Buffs.
Oh, he's a Colorado fan. Okay, there we go. Appreciate you for joining us, Jameer. We really appreciate it.
Good times. You came for the most enthralling conversation. UCLA football.
Absolutely.
It was a good run defense last year, Clinton. I distinctly remember them screwing me on multiple parlays because their run defense was so damn good. Only 92.6 yards per game allowed last year. And they faced some good running backs. Caleb Johnson, Jonah Coleman, Woody Marks, Katron Allen, Darius Taylor. None of those running backs hit the century mark against them last year. However, their pass rush was not good. And that seems to be a theme with a lot of these teams that we've been talking about lately. They had 22 sacks in 2024, which doesn't help your pass defense at all there, man.
Not at all. I want to flash back to the running backs here, man. Like, just, you mentioned getting stifled on your parlays. My college fantasy team got stifled in the week that they decided to blow up Caleb Johnson and limit him. I mean, just looking at this team, what I wrote down in here was just people that they held under that 96 yards a game. Caleb Johnson, 49 on 18 carries. Jonah Coleman, 21 carries for 95 yards. Woody Marks, who we just talked about, who had a great season for USC, 18 for 76. Katron Allen, 21 for 78. And Darius Taylor, 16 for 30. That is a stable of backs that you had to line up against, and they stifled them. Biggest problem is can't get pressure in the pass game, so then you're still losing games. If you remember back to Curtis Rourke watching into the Rose Bowl and set it on fire against UCLA. Big problem for them. In 2025, it's still kind of the same question, is that the D-line is listed as a work in progress. And more specifically, edge rusher is listed as a major concern. Keanu Williams, Gary Smith III returned from injuries this year. This has also kind of been a theme in our past couple episodes we talked about with Washington, having guys injured last year. USC just had the injuries, and UCLA also feeling the injury bug. So they're going to get those two names back this year. One big name I did take away from reading is to keep an eye on is freshman edge Cole Kalkshell. He looks to make a pretty good impact in year one. But they also did acquire two portal edges from Big Ten foes Michigan State and Michigan, Anthony Jones and Keshawn Bennett. However, Anthony Jones, Michigan State for 3 years. He had a combined 38 tackles in 3 years. And then Keshawn Bennett, 7 career tackles at Michigan in 4 years, Ryan. So don't really know what you're getting here. I mean, they could never get on the field. I understand that those are, especially in Michigan, what they've had on the defensive line there, but we'll kind of see if they can improve upon that pass rush. And before you touch on the schedule here, DB is getting a ton of makeover. We talked about the transfer portal. 9 transfers in the defensive back room for them between cornerbacks and safeties. That is a complete redo of your defensive backfield. Names to watch here. They're bringing in Andre Jordan, Jameer Johnson, Benjamin Perry at nickelback, and Key Lawrence at strong safety. Those were the 4 names that I took who are seemingly right now at this time to be the projected starting positions there for the DBs.
Schedule-wise for UCLA, Clinton, they have the misfortune of apparently not being big enough to or want to do bye games, I guess, for their non-conference. They only have 6 home games this year. They are at UNLV in the non-conference in addition to hosting New Mexico. And then they play someone else, and I can't fucking figure it out. Oh, Utah. Jesus Christ, I just was like, Utah conference game, Pac-12.
Dude, you're a mess tonight.
Dude, that's so
new Big Ten teams.
Dude, that is so embarrassing. I'm like, wow, they start their season with a conference game? That sucks for them. Jesus. So they start hosting Utah the first weekend of the season, a old Pac-12 rivalry there. So, I mean, that's tough, man. You're looking at a non-conference schedule where I know UNLV is, I don't know if I haven't done any sort of deep dive on their roster and what's his face Dan Mullen is keeping versus what followed Barry Odom to Purdue. But I mean, that was a good football team last year. Mm-hmm. They were on a Mountain West championship game victory away from being a playoff team last year. Will be interesting to see what Utah is next year, officially having moved on from Cam Rising. Should have a win against New Mexico, but that's a difficult non-conference slate. And then in conference play, you have alternating road trips to Northwestern, to Michigan State, to Indiana, to Ohio State. That's a lot of travel, man. And we made a deal about this with UCLA last year with the distance that they had to travel for their non-conference games, going to LSU and going to Hawaii, going to Penn State, going to Rutgers. This is a team that was well-traveled last year. So the issue for them now is I guess it's not great teams to start on the road, but then you got obviously the road trip to Indiana and the road trip to Ohio State loom large here.
Well, look what's scheduled in between that trip to Northwestern and Michigan State. That would be Penn State coming to town. That is could possibly be another bloodbath in the Rose Bowl. But then at least you're going to Michigan State. You're going to draw Maryland at home. That's not a bad in-betweener. Nebraska between your Indiana and your Ohio State games. If they're gonna take the Matt Rule projected jump for year 3, and Dylan Ryle is gonna jump again with Dana Holgerson as his OC. I mean, you're looking at, let's say you clip Maryland, right? You're looking at likely 3 straight losses. I know you're gonna want the revenge on Indiana. We'll see how Nico has adjusted to Big Ten life at this point and all this back and forth travel and what they have around him, because Signetti's going to have those boys ready to play. And then after Ohio State, you do draw Washington at home, but you talked about this with Roman, that this is a team who you see maybe on the Indiana type deal this year of kind of coming out of nowhere and pushing yourself into the playoff. And then you finish the victory with the victory bell against USC. Oh, yeah, it's always in LA, dumbass. Duh. They're both in LA, but
good Lord.
It's a tough schedule, and it's kind of similar where we've been through these Big Ten previews where we talk about with like Wisconsin. It's a tough enough schedule. Can you find somewhere to see them feasibly getting to 7, 8, maybe 9 wins? And I just don't know if that's in the cards for UCLA this year. Like what would, this is something we can hit a little more in the fall previews with the UCLA beat writer, but Ryan, what for you would kind of look like a successful season for this team?
I mean, it has to be bowl eligibility. You overachieved in year 1 by what seemed from the outside, at least looking in, to be all reasonable expectations by going 5-7. Now, I mean, you want to show that you're taking a step forward, but also I think the addition of Nico is going to kind of kick that into overdrive too. And I'm not sure that this is a roster that is going to make noise in the Big Ten at large. But I mean, if you go 2-1, 3-0 in the non-conference against that non-conference schedule, and you beat Northwestern on the road, and all of a sudden you're 3-1 or 4-0 hosting Penn State, I mean, especially if Nico's playing well by that point in the season, that all of a sudden becomes a pretty big game right there. So, I mean, they feel like a team that they have enough pieces that they're going to be pesky again, kind of like they were last year, right? Like they gave LSU a run. Not that LSU was a playoff contender by any stretch of the imagination, but I mean, they came on a little bit at the end of the year. I mean, the game against Penn State wasn't particularly close, and I don't think Penn State was ever in danger of losing that game. And if I remember correctly, I think UCLA's touchdown was a garbage time touchdown, so that one was pretty much out of reach the entire game. But they held that Penn State offense down for most of the afternoon. They shocked Nebraska last year. They shocked Iowa last year. It's a team that, especially if they get better quarterback play, they could sting some teams. They could be a potential disruptor in the overall playoff, like looking at the teams on their schedule. You're at Indiana in late October. Is that a team that you can potentially sting? We don't know what Ohio State's going to be yet. Maybe Ohio State takes a step back and you think by November they have everything figured out, but maybe that's a team that can go into the horseshoe and sting Ohio State. Maybe USC somehow takes a big step forward this year and then they sting USC at the end of the season to keep them out of the playoff or something like that. So I think at least, and again, I mean, we'll delve into this more in the fall when we kind of get the inside perspective, but at least from the outside looking in, I would think that if this team hits a bowl game and they win that rivalry game against USC, I think that would be a pretty successful season for them.
Absolutely. Their role is that of a disruptor this year, to muck people's seasons up and to just continue to build on for the next few seasons. One would think, barring a tremendous season, Ryan, that Nico's probably coming back for another year next year.
Well, that's
he's hot and in the portal again.
No, so we'll see. That's the good thing is, well, maybe he does. I mean, it's 2025, and you never know what happens. Maybe he has a great year, and he's like, I can really cash in if I transfer again. But given that his brother is there now, given that he's a California kid, assuming he stays again, let's assume for a second, and I get this isn't how it works, that the two options are either draft or stays at UCLA for his senior year. I mean, it's a win-win for UCLA because if he's good enough to go to the draft, then you are exceeding just bowl eligibility, and you're probably, I don't think you're making playoff noise, but you're definitely knocking on the door of 8-9 wins there. Or let's say he takes a step forward but decides that he's not ready for the NFL draft because they give him the return to school grade. Okay, cool. You have a guy heading into year 2 of your system as a senior who you can build around and have the entire off season to hit the portal and say, look, we have our quarterback. He took the step forward. He's coming back for his senior year. We expect him to take a big step forward. Come be a part of this year.
Absolutely. And then you just hand it off to your brother, no pun intended there, or pass it off, I guess, to your brother after that if everything continues to trend in the correct direction for that. Now, if I read correctly, Ryan, Madden is a true freshman.
He is a true freshman.
Right? He admitted to Arkansas and then bailed in the spring portal.
He enrolled in the spring and then left after the spring portal.
That is pretty amazing that you're able to do that, right? Sign your NIL, your letter of intent.
There's no letters of intent anymore. They just sign paperwork. They sign loan paperwork.
It just is.
You can leave it
crazy, right?
Literally, you can leave whenever you want.
Yep. Pretty crazy the world that we've come into.
I don't think that he was the only freshman who has left in the transfer portal.
I feel like we had him last year. We had him last year. Quick shout out to Jameer. Just followed us on YouTube. We really appreciate you giving us the subscription there, my man, helping us grow the show. We really appreciate you tuning in tonight with us. Coming to you live on Thursday. Ryan and I talked in the off season. We're like, if we want to put Mac in our bios, then we need to do a little better job with the Mac. So we are going to be joined by the Mac Sports Connection podcast, or the @MSC podcast on Twitter /X. They're going to join us on Thursday night. We're going to have some Mac questions for them. Again, probably be a 30, 40-ish minute episode. We are not deep diving every single Mac team, guys. Our main focus of this is the Big Ten and Notre Dame. But we're going to touch on some things. Obviously, defending MAC champs, Ohio Bobcats. Miami had a big addition in Daquan Finn coming in to be quarterback there. Ryan's alma mater, BG, with a big hire of Eddie George, bringing in. Who'd you bring in at quarterback there? Transfer quarterback.
I have no idea.
It's your boy from Notre Dame.
Oh, Drew Pine.
Drew Pine.
Holy fuck, I completely forgot about that. Oh, my God.
So you got Eddie George and Drew Pine.
My God. Okay, the Drew Pine experience.
He can't leave you.
This man transferred to Arizona State to try to play. He played. He got hurt. He transferred back to Notre Dame to get his degree because he's like, I'm not going pro in football. transferred to Missouri, was ass when he played at Missouri, and is now going.
BG.
What a fall! What a
For
fall!
Eddie George. He's gonna light the Mac up, baby.
Listen.
Anyways,
I loved my time at Bowling Green. There had to have been a better place that you could go to.
windy, cold. Oof. I don't know, Ryan. He's kind of ran the mill. I don't know if there's anywhere else that's
I think
willing to take him.
I'm pretty sure his family is like well off too. Like you couldn't have gone to like fucking UConn or Brown or something.
You know
to
what?
play.
He's been around enough. I bet we could get him on the podcast. He's an experienced, well-traveled man. We could get him on here, and you could ask him all kinds of questions.
I think the crazy thing is he still has like 3 years of eligibility left somehow.
I don't even want to get into that. This is so asinine. Everybody's playing for freaking 9-10 years now. It's just, I'm over it. What was the Miami kid from this past year? Wasn't he like his 9th or 10th year in college football? He's 27. Like,
I mean,
bro,
good
go
for
to
him.
McDonald's and get a job.
He got his undergraduate degree from Notre Dame. I'm pretty sure he got a grad degree from Missouri, and now he's just majoring in football. And
Yeah.
I mean, it's not a bad business school. I think he was a business major, so you're just collecting degrees. Good for you, man.
Yeah, and if BG's got any, attractive ladies up there, I'm sure they'd love QB1 for BG. So
Clinton, you can have a great time in Bowling Green, Ohio, if you are in your early 20s and somewhat good looking.
Did you ever experience that, Ryan? Did you miss the good-looking part, or?
Yeah, I was not good looking enough. I was a portly young lad.
I love your vocabulary where it's portly. I let us baller.
I was 13 and I wore husky pants, not like husky brand. Like I was a 32 husky when I was 12 years old. How bad is that as a child that they call your pants husky?
It's preview to your future unless you break it early.
Yeah, I still have like moderate body dysmorphia issues because my pants were labeled as husky.
I'm not gonna lie, buddy. I had husky as well.
It's not it. Yeah,
4th grade through 7th grade. Not kind to me.
I think we need to stop here before this becomes a therapy session and people look at me a little differently than they already do.
Well, yes, guys, join us Thursday night as we will talk some MAC football. We're excited to get in there. Both of us being OU grads, Ryan being a BG grad. We both hate Miami. And then we'll talk about the bottom tier of the MAC as well. So appreciate y'all for joining us tonight. Hope you guys will tune in on Thursday night with us.
For Husky Clinton, I am Husky Ryan. I am about to not sleep for the next 2 weeks because Dallas and Vegas play on alternating nights and they start at 9 o'clock Eastern time. Fuck me. Good night, everyone. Bye-bye.
See ya.